On the seventh day of Jaysmas, I reviewed a murder frame detective.
Condemned: Criminal Origins. When this game was first suggested to me, it was described as a beat-up-the-homeless simulator. Well, that's not very nice. We can't do that, especially not on Christmas. But it is on the list, so it's sort of out of my hands. Condemned is a shooter game where you play as a law enforcement adjacent protagonist who finds himself framed for murder and then hunted down by his own precinct while he searches for the true culprit. On the surface, this doesn't really seem to stand out from the other FPS games of the time, but there are some quirks that give it more character. Rather than being provided weapons that you carry throughout the game, you're tasked with finding them yourself from the environment or off of enemies in each of the levels. These include melee weapons such as wooden planks, pipes, and sledgehammers, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. While it's generally up to you which weapons you want to use, some specific weapons, such as axes or crowbars, are actually required to progress through certain parts of the game. You can also find firearms, usually on enemies as they're trying to kill you with them. Make sure you get the gun out of their hands quickly, however, as the gun only has so many bullets and will start to deplete with each shot that the enemy fires. Aside from the weapons, you also have a kick, which is usually saved for stunning enemies to drop whatever they're holding, and a long-range taser, which does the same thing but even better. It has a recharge time after every use, however, so spamming it is not an option, and you'll want to find a proper weapon ASAP. An element of the game I didn't expect was the detective part, where you have to use special devices to analyze scenes of interest. Here you have to look for unusual markings, stains, or any other types of clues that may help you in your investigation. I think that this was a neat idea for the most part, but occasionally it can get a bit finicky when you aren't looking at the correct object from the exact angle that the game wants you to. The story of the game is an intriguing one, if not also a bit confusing. The main target of the game is a serial killer who targets other serial killers by using their own elaborate methods of killing against them. That may sound a little familiar, but try not to think about that. Aside from that, there's also some bizarre stuff going on where people from the worst parts of the city are suddenly becoming uncontrollably feral and violent, apparently due to the mysterious sonic waves that are also killing the neighboring birds. These animal-like enemies are smarter than you'd think, often finding ways to ambush you and hide in places that are hard to see. They even fight in such a way that makes strategy in battle very important. You can't just run in and start swinging. You have to know when to block, when to dodge, and when to strike if you want to survive. Other than this, there's some side objectives of collecting birds and metal pieces, which were scored on at the end of each chapter. As we pursue the serial killer, we start to have what seem to be hallucinations of this monstrous creature. Further into the game we see more of these, and it starts to make us question if they might actually exist. We even find information about ourselves that may link us to them. Unfortunately, the game ends in kind of a strange way. I won't spoil it here, but let's just say it leaves a lot of those loose ends untied that you may have wanted to have explained. We don't even really get an explanation on why we've been collecting those birds and metal pieces. The levels are dark and gritty, which matches the tone and gameplay pretty well, though the constant rundown environments do get a little repetitive after a while. It really makes you grateful when you do get to see some different scenery. It's a game where you can get lost on occasion, but I think that's on purpose, since you're in a lot of dark, spooky environments, and the progression points usually make sense for the most part. There was this one time in this house that just felt weird though. Basically, you're just searching this attic and encounter a dead end. You fight an enemy and then wander around trying to figure out how to proceed. After wasting some time, you look back at the dead end and it's just gone. This isn't too bad the first time, but I actually had to redo this part, and the waiting was pretty annoying the second time around. As far as I can tell, you can't just run to a specific part of the house to make the obstruction go away any faster either. You literally just have to waste a few minutes wandering and then it'll eventually vanish on its own. That may not sound that bad, but you want to know why I had to do this twice in the first place? I actually encountered a soft lock. Basically what happened is I made my way to the attic. I was supposed to take a picture of some evidence, but I missed it and jumped back down to the ground floor in such a way that it was impossible to go back up. Even the stairs that I took to reach the attic originally were now sealed, meaning that the evidence needed to progress the game was now impossible to reach. All that being said, I did enjoy Condemned overall. It feels a lot like one of those old school FPS PC games, with some special quirks that make it more appealing to me than most of the modern FPS games we have nowadays. I would try out the sequel to see if any of those previously mentioned loose ties get, well, tied, but I've been told by expert sources that the second game is maybe not the best sequel. Well, we still got plenty of games to go, so we better get a move on.